There's a number that every defense analyst in Washington is staring at right now. A number so alarming that it has Saudi officials going on live television and saying something almost unthinkable, that America has abandoned them. That number is 645. In 5 days of war, the UAE alone fired 645 interceptor missiles. Each one costs $4 million. Each Iranian drone they stopped, Iran built it for $50,000. Do the math. The Gulf has been spending $80 for every $1 Iran spends. And the stockpiles, built up over decades at a cost of billions, are now measured not in years, not in months, but in days. Today, we are going to explain exactly why that is happening, why Qatar is reportedly days away from running out, why the UAE is right behind them, and why the answer has everything to do with a decision made in Washington to prioritize one ally's defense over everyone else's. Stay with me, because the math on this is going to blow your mind. The United States and Israel launched what Pete Hegseth called, and I'm quoting, the most lethal and precise air power campaign in history against Iran. Strikes on nuclear facilities, strikes on missile infrastructure, strikes designed to end Iran's ability to threaten the region once and for all. What happened next stunned the Trump administration. Iran didn't just strike back at Israel. Iran didn't just target American bases. Iran opened fire on 11 countries simultaneously. Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Iraq, every Gulf state hosting American troops was hit. Airports were targeted. Oil refineries burned. Hotels caught fire in Dubai. Sirens went off over Doha at 1:40 in the morning. Explosions rattled Abu Dhabi neighborhoods that had never seen a moment of conflict in living memory. Trump went on CNN and said, his exact words, "The biggest surprise of the war has been Iran's attacks against Arab countries in the region." The biggest surprise. Except here's the thing. It wasn't a surprise to anyone who had been paying attention. The Gulf states themselves had warned Washington this would happen. Saudi representatives traveled to Washington just weeks before the operation to argue against it. They knew Iran would retaliate. They told America. They were overruled. And now their satellite images show smoke rising over the Ras Tanura oil refinery. And their officials are going on television to say that America has abandoned them. So how did we get here? And what does any of this have to do with interceptor missiles? When Iran fires a Shahed 136 suicide drone, it costs Tehran roughly $20,000 to $50,000. Some analysts put it even lower. These are cheap, mass-produced, essentially disposable weapons. When the UAE intercepts one of those drones using a Patriot PAC-3 MSE missile, that interceptor costs $4 million. If it's sold to a Gulf ally at international prices, the cost jumps to $12 million per shot. Do that math one more time. A $50,000 drone. A $4 million missile to stop it. That is an 80 to 1 cost exchange ratio in Iran's favor. Now multiply that across an entire war. In just 5 days, the UAE intercepted 645 drones and 169 ballistic missiles. That's not counting Kuwait, which intercepted 178 ballistic missiles and 384 drones. Not counting Bahrain, not counting Qatar, not counting Saudi Arabia. According to Defense Express analysis, approximately 800 PAC-3 MSE interceptors have already been expended across the Gulf in the first days of this conflict. At the U.S. military's cost of $5.17 million per missile, that's over $4 billion in interceptors, fired in days against weapons Iran manufactured for a fraction of that. Here is the number that should terrify every American taxpayer and every defense planner. Lockheed Martin produced 620 PAC-3 MSE interceptors in all of 2025. The entire year. 620 missiles. The Gulf has potentially consumed more than that in less than a week. To replace what has already been fired, Lockheed would need 15 and a half months of nonstop production at current rates. Even with plans to ramp up to 2,000 missiles per year, a target that won't be reached for years, the math doesn't work. The missiles being fired today cannot be replaced before this war escalates further. Secretary of State Marco Rubio reportedly confirmed the scale of the problem publicly, acknowledging that America produces only 6 to 7 advanced interceptors per month. 6 to 7 per month, against a consumption rate of hundreds per day. The Heritage Foundation had actually predicted this in January 2026, just weeks before the war started. Their assessment found that high-end interceptors, including THAAD, SM-3, SM-6, and PAC-3 MSE, would likely be exhausted within days of sustained combat operations against Iran. And here we are. The Gulf states are burning through their interceptor stocks at a rate that will leave them defenseless within days. Qatar is reportedly looking at potential depletion within 4 days. The UAE has perhaps a week. These are not fringe estimates. Defense Security Asia, Breaking Defense Analysts, and French broadcaster France 24 are all reporting these timelines. So the obvious question is, why isn't America rushing emergency interceptor stocks to its Gulf allies? The answer? and this is what Saudi analysts are saying out loud on state television, is that America's remaining interceptors are being prioritized for Israel. Let's put some numbers to this. During Israel's 12-day war with Iran in June 2025, that's the conflict last year, the United States burned through approximately a quarter of its entire THAAD missile interceptor stockpile. A quarter in 12 days, over one country. The current war is now in its 5th day. It is covering not one country, but 11 simultaneously. And it has already produced more total intercepts in its first 5 days than the entire June 2025 conflict. According to Defense Express, the U.S. has 7 THAAD systems and used 2 of them defending Israel in the June conflict. Those stocks have not been fully replenished. And China analysts at Asia Times are noting that every THAAD and SM-3 interceptor expended in the Middle East right now is one that cannot be forward deployed to the Pacific. A second-order effect that may be exactly what Iran intended. The Saudi analyst, who went on live television and said, America has abandoned us and focused its defense systems on protecting Israel, leaving the Gulf states that host its military bases at the mercy of Iranian missiles and drones. That analyst was not speaking from the fringes. That was a calculated, measured statement on state-adjacent media. The Saudi government does not allow that kind of accusation to air unless the sentiment at the highest levels reflects that reality. Washington has reportedly been stonewalling requests by Gulf states to replenish their interceptor stocks. The Middle East Eye reported this specifically, citing sources familiar with the requests. The UAE formally asked for American assistance to strengthen its air defense network and has not received what it asked for. The countries that hosted the American bases, the countries that enabled the operation, the countries that, let's be clear, had warned Washington this would happen and were told to stand down. Those countries are now being left to manage their own depletion. Iran is not trying to win a conventional war. Iran is not trying to destroy the Gulf states militarily. Iran's strategy is financial attrition. And it is working almost exactly as designed. Firas Maksad of the Eurasia Group explained this on CNN. Iran has a lot more short-range ballistic missiles capable of reaching its immediate neighbors compared to long-range projectiles. Short range, cheap to manufacture, easy to launch from mobile platforms that look like civilian trucks. The IRGC switched to what Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi called a mosaic defense tactic. Decentralized cells launching drones and missiles from across the country, making it almost impossible to suppress the launch capability through airstrikes. Every day the war continues, Iran's relative advantage improves. Here's why. Gulf interceptor stocks are a fixed inventory. They were purchased over years and stockpiled. They deplete as they are used. American replenishment runs at 6 to 7 per month. Iran's drone manufacturing is a production line, and it's inside Iran, in facilities that American airstrikes have not reached. Ali Bakir, a defense analyst and professor at Qatar University, summarized it bluntly in Breaking Defense. Despite decades of heavy defense spending, Gulf states remain highly exposed to missile and drone warfare. Air defense systems can intercept, but not at scale or at low cost. Saturation attacks remain a serious concern. Collective coordination among Gulf states is, in his words, operationally non-existent beyond the public statement. The civilian consequences of this strategy are already visible. Dubai's property market, which spent a decade attracting mobile global capital, Russian oligarchs after 2022, European executives seeking tax efficiency, Chinese investors on Palm Jebel Ali, was built on a single assumption: security. That assumption is producing drone footage of smoke over Riyadh's diplomatic quarter, sirens over Dubai Marina at 3 a.m., shelter-in-place orders across Doha neighborhoods, flight cancellations by the thousands, school closures entering their 5th consecutive day. The Gulf was the one place in the neighborhood where you could park capital in a 50-floor apartment and be confident no missile would reach it. That assumption is gone. And the billionaires are not being irrational when they start calculating whether the fundamental security proposition that justified the original purchase still exists. Here's the scenario that keeps every defense planner in Washington awake at night. The UAE said it will not sit idly by. Qatar said it reserves the right to retaliate. Saudi Arabia said it will take all necessary measures, including the option of responding to aggression. Those are not words. Those are calculations. Ryan Bohl, a senior Middle East and North Africa analyst at the RAIN network, told Breaking Defense directly, if Iranian attacks continue throughout this week, he would expect Gulf Arab states to eventually participate in counterattacks on Iran. The UAE, in particular, he said, would be one to watch. Saudi Arabia, too, because they need to restore deterrence against Iran, and sitting passively by while burning through their interceptors won't accomplish that. There is a narrow window between now, when Gulf states still have enough interceptors to support offensive operations, and the moment when their stocks are so depleted that offense is no longer viable. That window is closing. If the Gulf states strike Iran directly, the conflict transforms. Iran's response to Gulf counterstrikes would not be measured in hundreds of missiles. It would escalate. And Iran's inventory of short-range weapons capable of reaching Gulf targets is not running out. It's a production line. The IRGC posted on Telegram after 2 drones hit the American embassy in Riyadh that it had begun efforts to destroy what it called American political centers in the region. Not military bases. Those have been targeted since day one. Not energy infrastructure. It started with Ras Tanura, political centers, embassies, consulates, the formal diplomatic architecture of American presence in the Middle East, building by building, drone by drone. The Vienna Convention guarantee, the one symbolic guarantee of international order that even Iran had respected in every previous conflict, is gone. The embassy in Riyadh is smoking. The UAE alone fired 645 interceptors in 5 days. Each one cost $4 million. Each Iranian drone it stopped cost $50,000. An 80-to-1 cost exchange ratio. And the stocks are days from depletion. The countries that hosted America's bases. The countries that warned Washington this would happen. The countries that spent decades and hundreds of billions of dollars buying American weapons, training with American forces, hosting 40,000 American troops. Those countries are watching America's remaining advanced interceptors flow to Israel while their own air defenses drain toward zero. A Saudi analyst went on live television and said, America has abandoned the Gulf to protect Israel. The IRGC announced it is targeting American political centers. Trump told CNN that the biggest surprise was Iran attacking Arab countries. The thing every analyst predicted. The thing the Gulf states themselves predicted. The thing they flew to Washington to warn against. And Lockheed Martin is producing 6 to 7 new interceptors per month. The math is almost done. The question is, what happens when the last interceptor is fired and the next wave arrives? If this story matters to you, and if you care about what's really driving this war beyond the headlines, share this video, like it, drop a comment below with what you think happens next. Because the decisions being made in the next 72 hours will determine whether this stays a regional war or becomes something no planning document in Washington has a framework for. I'll see you in the next one.